Thank you, Senators.
Thank you.
Stick around. We have another one, right?
Yep.
2402.
Oh, no.
Oh. We're not doing serial bills this.
Oh, my God.
Mr. Chair, members, a governing body of a municipality is required to order and call an election on question of the issuance of bonds. HB 2402 alters the requirements of the informational pamphlets required to send to voters by requiring the estimated tax and total cost of the debt to be calculated for the bond at the maximum interest rate authorized by the voters. It requires an explanation for the general purpose and projected projects in a neutral, factual manner. It states that a yes vote on the ballot may authorize an increase in the primary tax to pay for the operation and maintenance of the project funded by the bonds. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Questions? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you remember, was there a bill similar to this to last year that we had? Does that ring a bell at all?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Smith, I did not see a bill for last year, but I'd be happy to check.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, any request to speak?
Yes, sir.
the
The
sponsor's
sponsor's
here, I'm
here.
sorry.
He's
He's still here.
first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for hearing this bill. This bill, the genesis from it came from bond issues really across the state, but particularly in the southern reaches of my district, which would be Pima County, where we had $850 million worth of bonds up for this last year that all went down. But that's beside the point. The point of the bill, of many points, is that in the bill package, in the information packet, the people taking down the bond will typically put in a range, and then they will do the rest of the calculations at the lowest range that they're putting in their bond information, so that they may take a low house value and a very low interest rate, yet they'll publish a range in the bond information packet from 3% to 8%, and don't give any information in the voter guide or the information pamphlet of what it may cost at the higher end. Should the bond not be able to be taken down at a substantial lower rate. And secondarily, the second point that I wanted to ask is that, or point out, is that in the voter information packet, we want to make sure that the voters understand the maintenance of effort that are connected with many of these bonds that are issued. And so a statement in there that a yes vote on the bond issue may increase your property taxes. Mr. Chairman, I have with me the person that really helped me with this bill is Supervisor Allie Miller. Supervisor Miller is from District 1, Pima County. She serves on the Board of Supervisors there in her first term. And I'm sure she can fill you in on any questions that you may have. Before that, though, I would stand for any questions that you have.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, to make it clear, part of the information in the pamphlet that you're requesting is how much your taxes will increase?
No, Senator Allen, Mr. Chairman, Senator Allen, the package, and again, I think I'll have Ms. Miller further explain it, but the package is typically now the bond package will go out at, information package will go out 3% and 8%. We want, and they always run it at the low end, what they think they're going to be. We now want to have an explanation in there. What happens if it's not? What happens if it's at 8%?
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could jump the system for request to speak, I think Supervisor Miller has signed it. Thank you, Senators.
Start the 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of this bill this afternoon. My name is Allie Miller. I am a supervisor in Pima County in District 1. I am here today in support of this bill because I believe it is crucial that we always strive for the most transparent process possible to ensure that voters have the best and most accurate information. And getting to the question that someone asked, right now the way the statute reads, it allows for use in the calculation an estimated interest rate. So the estimated interest rate isn't stated only in the packet. In Pima County, for example, we were asking for an 8% interest rate. That was the ceiling, but the calculation was done with between 2.7 and 3.4%. And that got very confusing for the voters, and it created a lot of distrust. And I believe that played a big role in why those bonds didn't pass, because people weren't sure of what they were voting on. So when that rate is requested to be approved by the voters, those voters should be presented with calculations that utilize the highest rate. And I believe it is our duty to ensure those voters always understand exactly what they're voting on and what they are approving. An estimated rate does not provide the clarity and accurate information for making an informed decision. And for those who might argue against this enhancement to transparency, I would say that an example of a bond election, that we just went through in Pima County that I just discussed. And this was the first failure of the bonds in 30 years in Pima County. And again, I believe it was directly related to the lack of trust as it relates to this bill. And it was a lack of trust in the data that was being presented to them. And now it is in the name of transparency that I respectfully request that you support the passage of HB2402. And thank you very much for your time and opportunity to speak to you today. And if you have any questions.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Shocked that people don't trust government. Very disturbing. Very
We have
disturbing.
quite a few
Any
people
requests to
that,
speak?
yes, we have quite a few people that do want to speak besides Timothy Desjarleras.
Okay, and again, we're going to ask you to keep your comments below 2 minutes, preferably around 30 seconds.
I'll be no problem. Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Committee on Government, thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Timothy Desjarleras. I am a student at the University of Arizona studying political science and communications, and I'm also a recently registered voter. Last year, I had the privilege of participating in my first election, where I voted against the enormous bond package that had been proposed in Pima County. I also participated in a local campaign that was working to oppose that bond election, and one of the greatest challenges was working to make sure that our community's voters were well informed. Therefore, I am rising today in support of HB 2402 because I believe it is absolutely imperative that voters be provided with all of the facts, not just some of the facts. In Pima County, we had a scenario where our county government used convenient estimates of the interest rates to try to justify the passage of a bond, rather than informing the voters of how high interest rates could have actually been. Some in our community and state oppose this bill because they believe it may provide undue burdens on local governments to try to get bonds passed. However, I believe we should never substitute transparency, fairness, and accuracy with convenience. I believe there is no such thing as providing a voter with too much information, except if you're, of course, trying to manipulate the results of it. This bill gives voters in our state a greater perspective on any bond election, and just like in any scenario when you evaluate a request for money, I believe we should have the full facts, consequences, and effects before we vote on a bond. I urge each and every one of you today to support this bill to improve transparency and provide greater information and choice to the voters of our great state. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Questions?
Very good.
Very good. You went a little over, but since you seem to be on the right philosophical trail in your life,
Thank you.
No, he didn't go over. He didn't go over.
didn't?
No,
Okay.
no. He had 20 seconds.
All right. Well, you can. Okay.
I'm keeping track.
All right. Well, you can bank that 20 seconds for another bill.
Okay, Megan.
Who else do we
Megan
have?
Kittner, Arizona Association of Counties. She's against the bill.
Oh.
Megan here?
Man, let's not
Oh,
interject
Megan's not
negativity
here.
into this hearing.
Okay. Nicole Lance with City of Surprise. She's against the bill.
Strict minute and a half policy.
Against the bill?
Yes.
Chair Kavanaugh, members of the committee, thank you for your time today. I'm Nicole Lance. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Surprise, community of over 125,000 citizens in the Northwest Valley. I am testifying in opposition to the bill, but first I do want to point out we do have some common interests, fiscal pragmatism being one, and transparency being the second. However, we do advocate for comprehensive transparency, and that is one of the primary criticisms of the bill as drafted. We agree voters should have a full understanding of what they are considering, but believe it should be comprehensive representation as opposed to the current proposal. General obligation bonds are the most inexpensive form of financing for a municipality. With a lot of infrastructure left to build in many of our communities, our interest is being able to meet the needs of our community in both a transparent and a fiscally responsible manner. With that, we respectfully request consideration of an amendment to be offered to allow for comprehensive information, which doesn't mean including only the worst case scenario, but instead also including the most likely scenario, that be given to the taxpayer to ensure that this remains a viable tool for your Arizona communities. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
Yes, Senator Allen.
Mr. Chairman, have you suggested this to the sponsor of the bill? And the sponsor was that, Leach?
Chair Kavanaugh, Senator Allen, the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, and Mr. Tom Belshey is here as well. They have been in communication with the sponsor of the bill regarding that request.
Okay. Who else do you have to speak?
We have, next,
How
Tom.
many more do we have?
We have three more.
Next.
Tom Belshey, League of Arizona City and Towns, against the bill.
Okay.
And then we'll have, just one more.
Okay.
Ryan Cunningham.
Hey, I noticed a lot of people are reading prepared text, and we give extra points for creativity if you go. Just for the scoring purposes, you should know that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Tom Belshey. I'm the Deputy Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. I'll be brief. We are in agreement, or understand at least the idea that we want to provide information regarding the maximum interest rate. But we think that to just include the worst case scenario at the maximum interest rate and not include what might be information that is in the current interest rate climate would also be misleading. And so that's one issue that we have with the bill. We have offered some amendment language to the sponsor that we hope that he will consider. Also, the other, just briefly, the other issue that we have is it says that property tax will increase for maintenance and operation of the items that are built by these. In cities and towns, it is possible for you to pass a secondary property tax without having a primary property tax. And so those items will be built using other forms of revenue. With the clarifications in the statute, we would be fine with the direction it's going. We just want to make sure that both sides of the issue, what we consider to be the most likely scenario and the worst case scenario, can both be provided for in the publicity pamphlet.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll tell you, and I actually don't really have a problem with that, but although one thing that requiring the high one is that it will discourage what I consider to be really poor practice among some municipalities of throwing in an outrageously high number. So if you don't get the two, at the very least, if this goes forward, you won't have municipalities, saying maximum of 12% when the current rate's around 4%, and they know that it'll never get that high. So,
Mr. Chairman, to that point, I just want to make sure that folks understand that when they use the higher interest rate, they're trying to be conservative, and obviously this is a new requirement, and so I think you'll see a change there. Sometimes the high interest rate has to do with what's called variable rate debt, and that would take a lot of time to explain, which I'm sure that you don't want to hear right now.
30 seconds.
But I just want to make sure that that there is an understanding that sometimes when that higher rate is put up there, it's for a very good financial reason, and it is what is recommended by our financial advisors.
Okay, but that sounds like CYA on their part, but that's something else. Senator,
Well, Mr. Chairman, and sir, I guess I would just, note when we have our own budget discussions here, and certain executives in the past would certainly inflate revenue numbers to make it look like a more palpable. Oh, should I know that I said that? To make it look, to make the numbers look a little rosier. And so I guess my concern would be if we put in the likely rate. Let's see. Do you have any concern that number could be reflective of a not entirely accurate picture, and then the worst case scenario, especially when you're talking to raising people's taxes, is the most prudent way to go?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Smith, What we're worried about is we want people to have all of the information. We went back and took a look at the last 5 years of general bond, obligation bond issuances that happened in cities and towns, just cities and towns. And what we found was that they were issued at an average rate of 3%, the highest being 4.4. If I don't really understand how it benefits us to overstate the interest rate than for financial reasons that I talked about with variable interest rate debt. If we agree now to talk about including both the maximum and what we consider to be the most likely rate due to the interest rate climate, then I think that gives everyone a range and they can decide for themselves what is most likely to happen. If you give them the worst case scenario, I think it unfairly makes them think that they may be paying 3 or 4 times what they're actually going to be paying for a bond issue.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to that point, and maybe the answer is that no bond issue should be allowed to go before the voters, which has a maximum interest rate of more than 100% of the current interest rate. Maybe if there was such a massive change in the interest rate in such a short period of time, that the voters need to reassess the whole idea. Do we want to do something like this? But that's, I just talk philosophically.
And again, we are open to bringing in our financial advisors, sitting down with the sponsor and talking about an amendment that would make us comfortable with it.
Okay. Well, you can always talk to him. Talk is cheap at the legislature. Thank you. All right, who else we got?
Okay, Ryan Cunningham for the bill, and he's the last one that wants to speak.
Okay, Ryan's for the bill. All right, again, we're limiting you to 15 minutes.
Except I see that Megan's here. She wasn't here when I called before, but she's here now.
Okay.
She's probably bouncing around between committees.
So, Mr. Chairman, members here, I just want to say I'm Ryan Cunningham. I actually work for Supervisor Miller. I'm in charge of her constituent services. And I just want to kind of quickly state some of the calls that we've got into our office regarding this November bond election. Since when the Pima County Board of Supervisors put the bond to the voters, to the day the bond was actually, to the day of the election, we had 47 calls in our office in regards to the bond election. 14 of those calls actually involved questions about the interest rates. You know, some people were displeased about the differences with the 8% and then between the 2 and 3%. And then we also had 17 calls into our office asking about operations and maintenance, kind of an estimated cost, and they all asked how we'd be paying for that expected increase in operations and maintenance. So I just wanted to give you those numbers, and I'm here for any questions.
Questions? No, thank you. And finally,
Megan, yes, Kittner, Arizona Association of Counties.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. And yes, I was bouncing around between committees. I'm lucky enough to have friends in the room, though, that let me know what I'm supposed to be doing. So again, my name is Megan Kittner. I'm with the Arizona Association of Counties, and we're here today in respectful opposition to the bill. And our concern, I think, is a little different than other folks' concern. Ours is because the bill adds additional language to the ballot. And our election folks generally are always concerned when we talk about adding additional language to the ballot. Because that additional language can cause the ballot to be longer. And when the ballot gets longer, then that can potentially push us onto a second page or a longer ballot, and that can potentially increase cost. So we think that it's great to have information in the publicity pamphlet where people can become educated on issues. We just ask that the ballot, that language be left off the ballot because we feel that's the place for people to make decisions. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Stevens, I'm sorry, Smith.
Thank you, sir.
Stevens. I got so many bills, I got Stevens on my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan, so I guess my question, would you disagree with the League's support of their proposed amendment that would want them to add in more ballot language that would say, here's what we think the expected rate is in addition to the higher one? So.
Mr. Chair, Senator Smith, I do apologize. I kind of ran in halfway through Mr. Belshie's testimony, so I'm not exactly sure what they're proposing as far as an amendment goes. But
Mr. Chairman, Megan, he was proposing that to have an additional language in there to say what the expected rate might be in addition to the max rate, which of course I would say would add even more ballot language. So I'm wondering, would you oppose that League amendment?
Mr. Chair, Senator Smith, I would obviously have to bounce any potential amendment off of our members, but
We tried to
we have
bounce
been
to the other
pretty,
committee, eh?
well, we have been pretty consistent in our opposition to adding more language to the ballots in general. So,
Right. Senator Smith gets the
Okay,
trick
and
question of the session award.
And Mr. Chairman, Daniel, he would like to speak if necessary, but I think, do you think it's necessary, Daniel? I'm not the chairman, but he's.
Yeah, no, hey, leave it.
Chair, again, for the record, my name is
discourse.
Dan Bogert with the County Supervisors Association. Again, we're here in respectful opposition to the bill. The one thing I just want to clarify on the city's proposed amendment is I believe that's supposed to be going into the publicity pamphlet, not necessarily onto the ballot. So I think that would be the difference as far as ACO's opposition. That I can answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
I would just say that the only thing less read than election publicity pamphlets are public notices in newspapers. All right, that's it?
That's it.
All right, let's move this baby.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move House Bill 2402 with a due pass recommendation.
Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
No.
Mr. Chair, could I explain my vote?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with a couple of things on here. The concerns that were mentioned about giving actual notification, not just the maximum. I think that's just as misleading as if you only give them the minimum. I would be comfortable if we added the range or the expected rate. I think that makes sense. I'd be comfortable with that, but I don't think I will ever be comfortable with adding additional language onto the ballot, not only because it potentially lengthens the ballot, but more so because that's the place where you make the choice when you are voting. It's not the place where you are to be lobbied or persuaded one way or the other. That's the place where you make the actual vote. So I vote no.
Mr. Chairman, explain my vote. May I explain my vote?
Yes.
Oh, thank
Give
you.
me the candy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Supervisor Miller for traveling far down here along with her staff and as well as one of our good speakers that we heard from, our newly minted voter from last year. So thank you to Representative Leach. I vote aye.
Mr. Chairman, to briefly just say, I think there's a couple of glitches in the bill, but I'm hoping that they can get worked out because I think what's trying to be solved here is important, so I'm voting aye.
They always do. They always get worked out.
Always get
yeah.
worked out.
I too would be more comfortable with the two figures, but this is better than none, so I will move it out. I vote yes. Oh, you voted 4 ayes, 2 nays, 1 not voting. You have passed House Bill
2402.
2402. All right, we're going to do